Ambassador Kethvar of the Velrani hegemony sat alone in his private chamber, surrounded by floating screens filled with ancient records. His scaled fingers moved through the holographic displays, pulling up files that had not been opened in decades. The records told a story that most of the galaxy had forgotten, a story about a small blue planet and its foolish, hopeful people. 200 years ago, humanity had arrived at the galactic stage. Their ships were crude things made of metal and hope. Their weapons were laughable. Their understanding of faster-than-light travel was barely functional. But they came with smiles on their faces and dreams in their hearts. Kethvar remembered watching the historical footage as a young student. The first human ambassador had stood before the Galactic Council with tears of joy in his eyes. He spoke of cooperation. He spoke of friendship between species. He spoke of a future where all races would work together for the common good. The council had listened politely. Then they had laughed. Not openly, of course. The elder races were too civilized for that. But behind closed doors, the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy had made their plans. Humanity had something valuable. They had a fertile planet. They had useful genetic material. They had strong bodies that could work in conditions other species found unpleasant. Most importantly, they had no real power to stop anyone from taking these things. The division of Earth's solar system happened quickly. The Velrani claimed Mars and its mineral wealth. The Krethnai Collective took the asteroid belt. The Morvathi Trading Guild established exclusive rights to all human commerce. And Earth itself became a protected zone, where humanity would be allowed to live under careful supervision. Protected. Kethvar almost laughed at the word now. Protection meant that human colonies were seized whenever they became profitable. Protection meant that human workers were shipped across the galaxy to labor in mines and factories. Protection meant that human children were taken to research facilities where scientists studied their remarkable adaptability. The humans had protested, of course. They filed formal complaints through every legal channel the council provided. They sent ambassadors to plead their case. They wrote letters and made speeches and begged for basic dignity. Every petition was stamped with the same word: denied. Kethvar had personally signed hundreds of those denials during his early career. It was simply how things worked. The strong took from the weak. The elder races had built the galactic order over millions of years. Humanity had existed for barely a cosmic heartbeat. They would learn their place eventually. For 160 years, they seemed to accept it. The humans continued to work. They continued to suffer. They continued to hope that someday, somehow, things would change. Then, 40 years ago, everything went quiet. The last human ambassador had delivered his final speech to the council. His name was David Chen, and unlike his predecessors, he did not beg. He did not plead. He simply stood at the podium and looked at each council member in turn. "We came to you with open hands," he had said. "We offered friendship. We asked only for fairness. You answered with chains and cruelty. You took our worlds. You took our freedom. You took our children." He paused, and something in his eyes made even the proudest council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We will not forget. We will not forgive. And we will not ask again." Then he walked out of the chamber. No human had been seen in council space since that day. At first, the elder races sent scouts to investigate. The human colonies in the outer rim had been abandoned. The settlements were empty, with no sign of where the population had gone. Some ships were sent deeper into human territory, but none of them returned. The council discussed the matter briefly and decided that humanity had simply retreated to die in some forgotten corner of space. Good riddance, most members agreed. The humans had always been more trouble than they were worth. Life continued. The galaxy turned. And slowly, humanity faded from memory. Kethvar closed the historical files and rubbed his tired eyes. He was not sure why he had felt compelled to review these old records tonight. Perhaps it was the strange reports coming from the border stations. Perhaps it was the unusual energy signatures that long-range sensors had detected. Perhaps it was simply the instinct that had kept his species alive for millions of years. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. The door to his chamber burst open. A young Velrani communications officer stumbled inside, her scales pale with terror. She was breathing so hard that she could barely speak. "Ambassador," she gasped, "you need to come to the council chamber." "Now." Kethvar rose slowly, his old joints protesting. What has happened? The officer's eyes were wide with a fear he had never seen before. Ships, Ambassador. Thousands of them. They appeared at the edge of the system 10 minutes ago. They are not responding to any communication. They are just waiting. Ships from where? Which species? The officer swallowed hard. Human ships, Ambassador. They bear human markings. But they are not like anything in our records. They are huge. They are dark. And there are more arriving every minute. Kethvar felt his hearts begin to race. That is impossible. The humans have no fleet. They have no technology capable of threatening us. Ambassador, please. The officer was nearly crying now. You need to see this for yourself. Together, they rushed through the corridors of the council building. Other officials were running in the same direction, their faces showing the same confusion and fear. When they finally reached the main chamber, Kethvar stopped dead in his tracks. The massive display screen showed the space around Nexus Prime. Where there should have been nothing but stars and a few patrol ships, there was now an armada. Thousands upon thousands of vessels hung in the void like a swarm of angry predators. They were black as the space between stars, barely visible against the darkness. But the sensors showed them clearly enough. 10,000 ships, and more were arriving with each passing moment. High Counselor Thexamon stood at the center of the chamber, his tentacles trembling. They are not responding to hails. They are not making demands. They have not fired a single shot. He turned to face the assembled council members, and Kethvar saw something he had never expected to see on that ancient face. Pure, absolute terror. They are just waiting. The High Counselor whispered. What are they waiting for? As if in answer, every screen in the chamber flickered. A human face appeared, calm and cold. A woman with gray hair and eyes like frozen steel looked out at them. Members of the Galactic Council, she said, we have returned. And this time, we are not asking for anything. The transmission ended. The screens went dark. And in the council chamber, 12 species who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years sat in stunned silence. The humans had come back. And somehow, everyone in that room knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the HSS Reckoning and watched the alien world turn slowly below her. Nexus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, the place where her species had been condemned to slavery 2 centuries ago. She was 63 years old. Her hair had gone gray long ago, and deep lines marked her face. But her hands were steady on the command console, and her mind was sharp as a blade. She had waited 40 years for this moment. A few more hours meant nothing. Around her, the bridge crew worked in perfect silence. There was no celebration, no excitement, only cold, focused determination. Every person on this ship had lost someone to the Council's cruelty. Every person had a reason to be here. Helena's reason had a name. Sarah. Her daughter had been 7 years old when the Velrani soldiers came to their colony. The official report said that Sarah had been selected for a genetic research program. The truth, as Helena learned years later, was far worse. She pushed the memory away. There would be time for grief later. Right now, she had work to do. Admiral, her communications officer reported. The Council is attempting to hail us again. High Counselor Thexamon wishes to negotiate. Helena almost smiled. Negotiate. The word meant nothing to her anymore. For 200 years, humanity had tried to negotiate. They had begged and pleaded and followed every rule the Council created. And what had it gotten them? Death. Slavery. The systematic destruction of everything they loved. Let them wait, she said. Let them wonder. Let them feel what we felt for 2 centuries. She turned to look out at the fleet surrounding her flagship. 10,000 ships, each one built in secret, each one carrying weapons that the galaxy had never seen. This was what humanity had become during their years of silence. This was what the Council's cruelty had created. Helena remembered the early days of the Exodus. She had been a young officer then, barely 23, when the last human colonies in Council space were abandoned. The entire species had packed what they could carry and fled into the void between stars. The Council did not follow. Why would they? The space between stars was empty and cold, filled with nothing but dust and radiation. No civilized species would choose to live there. The elder races assumed that humanity was fleeing to die in the darkness. They were half right. Many humans did die in those early years. The cold was brutal. Resources were scarce. Disease spread through the refugee fleets like wildfire. Helena watched friends and family members fade away, their bodies committed to the endless void. But humanity did not die. Instead, they learned to survive in ways that comfortable elder races could never imagine. They built stations in the darkness, hidden among the dust clouds where no sensors could find them. They developed new technologies born from desperation and necessity. They studied the weapons and defenses of the Council races, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited, and they remembered every atrocity, every stolen child, every burned colony, every casual cruelty inflicted by species who saw humans as nothing more than useful animals. Helena had risen through the ranks of the new human military during those years. She had helped design the ships that now surrounded Nexus Prime. She had tested the weapons that would soon tear through Council defenses like paper. She had trained the soldiers who would bring humanity's vengeance to every corner of the galaxy. 40 years. 40 years of preparation. 40 years of waiting. And now, finally, the waiting was over. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, "the Council's defense fleet is moving to intercept. 300 ships, mostly heavy cruisers." Helena studied the display. 300 against 10,000. The Council still did not understand what they were facing. They still believed that their technology was superior, that their experience would carry the day. They were about to learn otherwise. "Signal the fleet," Helena ordered. "Begin the demonstration." The human ships moved with a grace that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. They did not use the standard FTL drives that the Council races relied upon. Instead, they simply vanished from one point in space and appeared at another, ignoring the laws of physics that had governed galactic travel for millions of years. The Council's defense fleet tried to respond. They fired their weapons, launched their missiles, activated their shields. None of it mattered. Human weapons passed through Council shields as if they did not exist. Human ships dodged attacks that should have been unavoidable. In less than 5 minutes, the entire defense fleet was reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Helena watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. This was only the beginning. Before this day was over, the Council would understand exactly what they had created when they chose to enslave humanity. A new message appeared on the communication console. High Counselor Thexamon, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Please, we can discuss terms. Whatever you want, we can provide. Just tell us what you want." Helena activated the transmission that would broadcast to every screen on Nexus Prime. She wanted them all to hear this. She wanted them to understand. "For 200 years, she said, her voice calm and steady, "we asked nicely. We came to you with friendship and hope. We asked only to be treated as equals. And you answered with chains." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You took our worlds. You took our freedom. You took our children and used them for experiments. You taught us that mercy is weakness. You taught us that the galaxy only respects power." Behind her, the human fleet began to move toward Nexus Prime. Thousands of ships, advancing like an unstoppable tide. "We learned our lesson well," Helena continued. "We spent 40 years in the darkness, building, preparing, waiting. We created weapons you cannot imagine. We developed technologies you cannot understand. We became something new, something that does not ask, something that does not negotiate, something that simply takes." The first orbital defense station exploded as human weapons tore through its shields. Then the second, then the third. One by one, the mighty defenses of Nexus Prime crumbled into dust. "You had 200 years to treat us with basic decency," Helena said. "You chose cruelty instead. And now you will learn what happens when you push humanity too far." She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. "Begin the landing operations. I want boots on the ground within the hour. And spread the word to the rest of the fleet." Her eyes were hard as stone. "The harvest begins today." Throughout the human armada, soldiers prepared for battle. They checked their weapons. They sealed their armor. They looked at pictures of loved ones they had lost to Council cruelty, and in their hearts, they felt no mercy. The Council had burned that out of them long ago. All that remained was cold, patient, unstoppable vengeance. The galaxy was about to learn that some debts must be paid in blood. The crystal spires of Krethna Prime had stood for 10,000 years. They rose from the planet's surface like frozen music, monuments to the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Poets had written songs about their beauty. Artists had traveled across star systems just to see them shine in the light of the twin suns. Elder Magistrate Vorn watched them fall. The human ships had appeared without warning, dropping out of there impossible faster-than-light traveled directly above the capital city. They did not announce themselves. They did not make demands. They simply opened fire. The first spire collapsed in less than a minute. 10,000 years of history, reduced to glittering dust. Then the second fell. Then the third. The humans were not trying to conquer. They were trying to erase. Vorn scrambled for the emergency bunker beneath his palace. Around him, his people screamed and ran in all directions. The Krithni had never known war like this. They were scientists and philosophers, not soldiers. Their military existed mainly for show. "Why?" he shouted at the burning sky. "What do they want?" But deep in his hearts, he already knew the answer. The Krithni had been among the first to propose using humans for genetic research. Their scientists had made breakthroughs using human subjects that would have been impossible otherwise. At the time, it had seemed like simple progress. Humans were primitive. Their suffering did not matter. Now their suffering had come home. Far across the galaxy, the Morvathi Trading Guild was learning a different lesson. Guildmaster Threx stared at his financial displays in disbelief. Numbers that should have shown trillions in assets now showed nothing. Accounts that had held the wealth of 1,000 worlds were empty. Trading networks that had operated for millions of years had simply stopped functioning. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our systems are the most secure in the galaxy." His chief technician, a small Morvathi with trembling hands, pulled up a diagnostic report. "They have been inside our networks for decades, Guildmaster. Hidden programs, sleeping code, waiting for activation. They did not hack our systems today. They have owned our systems for 40 years. Threx felt his blood turn cold. For 40 years, the humans had been watching, learning, preparing. They had mapped every financial system, every trade route, every hidden vault. And now, with a single command, they had erased everything. The Morvathi Trading Guild, the wealthiest organization in galactic history, was bankrupt. Their fleets were stranded without fuel. Their stations were powerless. Their people were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They did not even fire a shot, Threx whispered. They destroyed us without firing a single shot. On the Velrani homeworld, General Castor was learning that firepower was not the answer either. His fleet outnumbered the human attackers 3-1. His ships were the finest the Velrani military had ever produced, crewed by veterans of 100 campaigns. By every measure of conventional warfare, he should have been winning. Instead, he was watching his fleet die. The human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. They appeared and disappeared at will, striking from angles that did not exist in normal space. Their weapons phased through shields as if the protective fields were not there. His sensors could not track them. His gunners could not hit them. "Fall back to the secondary position," Castor ordered, his voice hoarse with desperation. "All ships, fall back now." But there was no secondary position. The humans were everywhere, their black ships swarming through his formation like predators through a herd of prey. One by one, his vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light. In less than an hour, the pride of the Velrani Navy was reduced to scattered debris floating in the void. On the surface of Nexus Prime, human soldiers moved through the conquered streets. They wore powered armor that made them nearly unkillable, their faces hidden behind black visors. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They simply advanced, taking control of every government building, every military installation, every center of power. In a secure facility beneath the Council Administrative Complex, a Krithni scientist named Dr. Velth found herself face to face with one of these silent warriors. The human had removed his helmet, revealing a young face with old eyes. "Why?" Velth asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? You have won. You have defeated us. Why continue the destruction?" The human soldier looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and calm. "Do you know what my job was before the war?" he asked. "I was a teacher. I taught history to children. I had a wife. I had a son." He paused. "The Velrani took my son when he was 4 years old. They said he showed promise for genetic research. Velth felt her scales turn pale. I did not know. We found the research facilities. The soldier continued. We found the records. We know exactly what was done to our children in those places. His eyes were empty, like windows into a void. My son lived for 3 years after they took him. The experiments were very thorough. I was not involved in that program, Velth said quickly. I studied atmospheric science. I never hurt any humans. Did you protest? Did you speak out? Did you do anything to stop it? Velth opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. The truth was written on her face. That is what I thought. The soldier put his helmet back on. You did not commit the crimes yourselves. You simply looked away while others committed them. You told yourselves that humans were not really people, that our suffering did not matter. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. There is no punishment that equals what you did to us. There is no revenge that can bring back our children, our families, our worlds. But we are going to try anyway. Not because it will make things right. Nothing can make things right. But because you need to understand that there are consequences for cruelty. You need to learn that lesson so deeply that you will never forget it. He walked out, leaving Velth alone in the darkness. Across the galaxy, the harvest continued. World after world fell to human vengeance. Governments collapsed. Militaries surrendered. Civilizations that had stood for millions of years crumbled in days. And through it all, the humans did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They simply worked with cold, mechanical efficiency, dismantling everything the elder races had built. They had learned their lessons well. The Council had taught them that the galaxy was a cruel place, that only the strong survived, that mercy was weakness to be exploited. Now humanity was teaching those lessons back. The bunker beneath Nexus Prime had been built to survive anything. Its walls were 10 meters of solid neutronium, capable of withstanding direct nuclear strikes. Its shields could deflect energy weapons that would vaporize mountains. Its life support systems could keep its occupants alive for 1,000 years. The remaining members of the Galactic Council huddled inside like frightened animals, watching the destruction of their empire on flickering screens. Of the original 12 elder races, only 7 still had functioning governments. The Krethnai Collective had collapsed entirely, their leadership killed in the first wave of attacks. The Morvathi Trading Guild existed in name only, their wealth and power erased in a single day. The other fallen races were scattered across the stars, their surviving members fleeing in whatever ships they could find. High Counselor Thexamon sat at the center of the bunker's command room, his ancient body wrapped in ceremonial robes that now seemed foolish and empty. His tentacles lay limp against the floor. His eyes, which had seen the rise and fall of empires over thousands of years, stared at nothing. We must negotiate, Ambassador Kethvar said for perhaps the 100th time. Surely there is something they want. Territory, resources, revenge against specific individuals. We can give them whatever they demand. We have tried, Thexamon replied, his voice hollow. I have sent message after message. I have offered complete surrender. I have promised reparations beyond anything in galactic history. They do not respond. Then what do they want? The Velrani ambassador's voice cracked with desperation. They cannot simply want to destroy everything. That serves no purpose. A younger council member, a Krethnai named Selith, who had escaped the destruction of her homeworld, spoke quietly from the corner. They want us to feel what they felt. For 200 years, we ignored their pleas. We dismissed their suffering. We treated them as if they did not matter. She looked up, her crystalline eyes wet with tears. Now they are showing us what it means to not matter. Silence fell over the room. The truth of her words hung in the air like poison. Thexamon pulled himself upright with visible effort. I will try one more time. Perhaps if I speak to their leader directly. He activated the communication console and broadcast on all frequencies. His message was simple, stripped of all diplomatic formality. Admiral Vance, this is High Counselor Thexamon of the Galactic Council. I am speaking to you not as a leader, but as a person. I am old. I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen much suffering in that time, and I know that I have caused much suffering as well. He paused, gathering his thoughts. What we did to your people was wrong. I knew it was wrong even as I approved it. I told myself that it was necessary, that your species was too primitive to understand, that the benefits to galactic civilization outweighed the costs. I was a coward who hid behind comfortable lies. The other council members stared at him in shock. No High Counselor had ever spoken this way. I cannot undo what was done. I cannot bring back your dead or heal your wounds, but I can offer you everything that remains. Our worlds, our technology, our knowledge, our complete and unconditional surrender. Whatever justice you require, we will accept. He lowered his head. Please, tell us what you want. Tell us how to end this. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the screens flickered, and Admiral Helena Vance appeared before them. She looked tired. Thexamon noticed. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her gray hair was uncombed. This was not a woman enjoying her victory. This was a woman carrying a weight that threatened to crush her. You want to know what we want? Helena's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I will show you. The screens changed. Instead of Helena's face, they now showed documents, council records, reports, directives, hundreds of files scrolling past, each one bearing official seals and signatures. These are your own archives, Helena continued. We found them when we took your administrative centers. Very organized, very thorough. You kept excellent records of everything you did to us. The documents showed everything. Orders to relocate human populations for labor, authorization forms for genetic experiments, reports on the mortality rates in research facilities, bureaucratic language describing the systematic destruction of an entire species. Do you see this file? Helena highlighted one particular document. This is the authorization for Research Project 7749, the project that studied human child development under extreme conditions, the project that my daughter was assigned to. Thexamon felt his heart stop. She was 7 years old. The records show that she survived for 2 years in that facility before her body finally gave out. 2 years of experiments, 2 years of pain, and at the end, she was disposed of like laboratory waste. Helena's voice remained calm, but her eyes burned with cold fire. You asked me what we want. We want you to understand. We want you to know that every document in those archives has a face attached to it, a family, a story. We want you to look at your own records and truly see what you did. The screens went dark. The bunker fell silent. Then the lights began to flicker. They are cutting through the outer doors, a technician reported, his voice shaking. I do not understand how. Those doors were designed to withstand anything. Thexamon watched the status displays as, one by one, the bunker's defenses failed. Shields collapsed. Backup systems went offline. The mighty fortress that was supposed to protect them forever was being opened like a simple container. The final door began to glow red, then white. Then it simply was not there anymore, replaced by a ragged hole filled with smoke and heat. Human soldiers poured through the gap. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons raised but not firing. They spread through the room, surrounding the council members without saying a word. Admiral Helena Vance walked through the door last. She was shorter than Thexamon had expected, a small woman in a simple uniform, but she carried herself with the weight of 1,000 years of suffering. Thexamon rose from his seat. His ancient bones protested, but he forced himself to stand with dignity. Whatever was coming, he would face it on his feet. Will you at least tell us? He asked quietly. Is there anything left? Anywhere? Helena looked at him for a long moment. Then she removed a data chip from her pocket and placed it on the table before him. That contains the complete records of what your species did to ours. Every experiment, every death, every child taken from their parents. I want you to read it. All of it. I want you to understand exactly what crimes you are paying for. She turned to go, then paused. Your empires are finished. Your governments are dissolved. Your militaries are destroyed. But we are not going to exterminate your species. That would make us no better than you. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or exhaustion, or something that might have been mercy, buried deep beneath layers of grief. You will be relocated to marginal worlds. You will be given enough to survive, nothing more. You will spend the rest of your existence remembering what you did, and why it was wrong. She walked toward the door, her soldiers falling in behind her. And maybe, she said without looking back, in 1,000 years, you will have learned enough to be trusted again, but I would not count on it. The soldiers filed out. The door closed behind them. and the former rulers of the galaxy sat alone in their broken fortress, surrounded by the ashes of everything they had built. The age of the elder races was over. The age of humanity had begun. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. Helena Vance stood on the balcony of her apartment in New Geneva, watching the sun set over the rebuilt city. Earth had changed so much since the war ended. The pollution was gone, cleaned by technology humanity had developed during their years in exile. The scars of the old council occupation had been erased, replaced by new buildings and parks and monuments, but the deeper scars remained. Helena saw them every day in the eyes of her people. The hollow looks of survivors who had lost everything, the nightmares that woke veterans screaming in the darkness, the children who flinched at sudden movements because they remembered when the soldiers came. Victory, she had learned, did not heal wounds. It only created new ones. She was no longer Admiral Vance. The war was over, and she had retired from military service the day after the last council world surrendered. Now she was just Helena, a tired old woman trying to figure out what to do with whatever years she had left. A soft chime announced a visitor at her door. She walked inside and opened it to find a familiar face waiting in the hallway. Sithra was young for a Velrani, her scales still bright green with youth. During the dark years of human exile, her family had been among the few aliens who secretly helped human refugees escape council territory. They had smuggled food to starving colonies. They had hidden children from the genetic researchers. They had risked everything for a species that most of the galaxy considered worthless. "May I come in?" Sithra asked. Helena stepped aside. "Of course. I was not expecting visitors." They sat together in the small living room. Helena noticed that Sithra kept glancing at the window, at the city lights that sparkled in the growing darkness. "It is beautiful," the young Velrani said. "Your world. I had only seen pictures before. The reality is more. We had a lot of help rebuilding." Helena poured 2 cups of tea from a pot on the table. "Technology we developed in exile. Resources from the worlds we conquered." She paused. "Resources that used to belong to your people." Sithra accepted the cup with a graceful nod. "I did not come to discuss politics or reparations. I came to ask you a question." "Ask. What will humanity do now?" The young alien's eyes were steady and serious. "You have absolute power over the galaxy. Every species that once oppressed you is broken and scattered. You could rule as tyrants for 1,000 years, and no one could stop you." Helena sipped her tea slowly, considering the question. It was the same question that kept her awake at night. The same question that haunted every human leader, every military commander, every citizen who had survived the war. "I do not know," she admitted finally. "I truly do not know." "That is not an answer." "No, it is not." Helena set down her cup and looked out at the city lights. "When we were in exile, everything was simple. We had an enemy. We had a purpose. We knew exactly what we were fighting for and why. But now," she trailed off, searching for words. "We became something terrible during those years in the darkness. We became hard and cold and merciless. We had to, or we would not have survived. But now the war is over, and I look at what we have become, and I wonder if we lost something important along the way." Sithra leaned forward. "You showed mercy at the end. You could have exterminated our species. Many of your people wanted exactly that, but you chose to let us live. Was that mercy?" Helena asked bitterly. "Or was it just a different kind of cruelty? We took everything from you, your power, your pride, your place in the galaxy. We left you with nothing but shame and memory. Sometimes I think death would have been kinder." "No." Sithra shook her head firmly. "Death would have been easier. For you and for us. What you chose was harder. You gave us the chance to learn from our mistakes, to become something better than we were. And if you do not, if your people spend the next 1,000 years hating us and plotting revenge, then we will have proven that we deserve whatever comes next." The young Velrani smiled sadly. "But I do not think that will happen. I have spoken with many of my people. They have read the records. They understand what was done in their names. The shame is heavy, but shame can be a teacher." Helena was quiet for a long time. Outside, the last light of sunset faded into darkness, and the stars began to appear. "When I was young," she said finally, "before the exile, before the war, I used to dream about the stars. I imagined all the wonders we would find out there, all the friends we would make, All the adventures we would have. She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost peaceful. The galaxy we found was nothing like my dreams. It was cruel and cold and ruthless. But maybe it does not have to stay that way. Maybe we have a chance to build something better, something that actually matches those old dreams. Is that what you want? I do not know what I want anymore. I spent 40 years wanting revenge. Now I have it, and I feel empty. Helena looked at her hands, the hands that had signed orders for the deaths of millions. But I know what I do not want. I do not want to become them. I do not want to spend the next 1,000 years being the monsters they made us into. A sound from the street below caught their attention. Laughter. Children's laughter. Helena and Sithra moved to the window and looked down. In the small park across the street, a group of children were playing in the fountain. Human children, mostly, but among them, Helena could see others. A young Velrani with bright green scales. A Krethnai child whose crystal skin sparkled in the streetlights. A tiny Morvathi tumbling through the water with squeals of delight. How is that possible? Helena asked. Velrani and Krethnai children here. On Earth, refugees, Sithra replied. Some of your people have been taking in orphans from the conquered worlds. Not many, but enough. She watched the children play with something like hope in her eyes. They do not care about empires or revenge. They are just children. They want to play and laugh and be happy. Helena watched them too. The human children were teaching the aliens some kind of game with a ball. There was confusion and stumbling and more laughter. It was such a simple thing, such an ordinary, everyday thing, but it felt like something more. It felt like the beginning of something new. Maybe that is the answer, Helena said quietly. Not politics or treaties or grand declarations, just this. People learning to see each other as people, children playing together in a fountain, small acts of kindness that add up over time. It will take generations. We have time. Helena turned away from the window. For the first time in 200 years, we have time. She walked to her desk and picked up a datapad. On it was a speech she had been asked to give at the anniversary memorial next week. A speech about victory and justice and the sacrifices that had been made. She deleted it and began writing something new. Outside, the children continued to play. Their laughter echoed through the streets of New Geneva, mixing with the sounds of a city coming back to life. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly through the eternal night. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a new galaxy was being born. It would not be perfect. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and conflicts and moments of terrible doubt. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. And hope, Helena realized, was enough. Hope was always enough. It was how humanity had survived the darkness in the first place. And it was how they would find their way back to the light.